Welcome to the Science for Sport podcast, where we dive into stories and insights that drive peak performance. Join us as we uncover the secrets behind the science of success. Here's your host, Richard Graves.
Hello and welcome to the Science for Sport podcast with me, Richard Graves. This week, we're joined by the lead performance nutritionist at Premier League side Brentford, Ted Munson. We'll be asking him what nutrition looks like for a Premier League footballer. How important are individualised dietary strategies? And what should the core principles be for footballers at an elite level? Well, to answer these questions and share his methods when it comes to nutrition, we can hear from Ted now.
Unlocking sports science to push the limits of human potential. This is the Science for Sport podcast.
Well, Ted, welcome along. It's great to have you on this week's podcast. For those that aren't familiar with your history, you've got a wealth of talent in the field of nutrition across different sports and on different continents. So just bring us up to speed with your story, your career path to date that's led you to Brentford Football Club.
Yeah, so firstly, thank you for having me on. This is probably one of my go-to podcasts. I think the last one I listened to was the one with Sam Bowering, which was top. So yeah, hopefully I can top that and offer some good insight. So so I started out 12 years ago now. When I just finished university of Hull, doing sport and exercise science. And at that time, I didn't have a clue what I was going to go into. I knew I wanted to work with sport and elite sport. I was really lucky to get a sports science internship at Hull City Football Club. That was back in like the old Premier League days, with the Steve Bruce era, which was awesome. So that really gave me a really broad insight into sports science in general. And at the time, they didn't have a nutritionist. Or they did, sorry. So a guy who I'm still in touch with today called Shane Thurlow, but it was a day a month. So part of my role was kind of taking on some of those responsibilities. And at the time, I think there's only 2 or 3 working in the Premier League, which is amazing because now we've got 2 or 3 per club. That really kind of got me into it. And I went to Leeds Beckett University, did an MSc and a postgraduate diploma so I could become a sport and exercise, registered sport and exercise nutritionist under the BDA, which is, a must-have nowadays to work in full-time sport in sports nutrition. Moved down to London. Had a couple of consultancy roles in football. Worked with Millwall, MK Dons, quite a few different kind of teams down here, as well as I worked for Science and Sport, nutrition company. And at the time, it was got like a wealth of experience in other sports like cycling and running, endurance athletes, which was really opened my eyes of like what people can do with good nutrition. But I think things really started lifting off for me kind of 5 or 6 years ago. I set up my own consultancy, started working with Harlequins. So I was there for 3 years. Again, completely different sport, out of my comfort zone. That really kind of opened my eyes to working with different nationalities, different ideas and things like that. And I'd love to get back into rugby one day. I really, really enjoyed it. Started working with a pretty good Formula 1 team as well. Started consulting there. Again, just completely different, as well as with Luton Town Football Club. So I was with them. I had to leave after we got promoted to the Premier League. So again, like unbelievable experience. Worked with the Danish national team, football team that is, throughout their kind of Euro campaign into the Nations League. Kind of got that experience through my colleague, now ex-colleague Chris Haslam, who's now at Tottenham Hotspur. Kind of helped me land that role, and again learnt so much. This is going into my 4th season now as lead performance nutritionist at Brentford Football Club. So yeah, been here, been there. Definitely learnt a lot, and yeah, it's been a great ride so far.
Yeah, a lot to squeeze in there, no doubt. We're going to focus on football today, and because pre-season's in full swing now, the new Premier League season is just around the corner. What are the core fundamentals when it comes to nutrition for Premier League footballers, especially at this stage of the season when you're just building up to the campaign?
Yeah, I think there's so much more than what people think about. I think in no particular order, I kind of probably have like my top five things that I have to think about, and I think this on like a daily basis, so to say. I think the first one that kind of springs to mind is that kind of periodization of how we kind of structure our meals throughout the week, or even the day. So, when we've got our high days, low days, medium days, recovery days, and trying to build meals for the players based on what they're doing. So, we periodize what they do on the pitch, we periodize what they do in the gym. We've also got to periodize what they do in the kitchen as well. So that's what we're providing them, but also pushing them to kind of do that at home as well. So providing the education for some of them, providing even meals to take home so that they can meet the demands of what we're trying to ask them to do. So it's not just team meal periodization, there's also the individual in there as well. And that brings me on to my next one, is because everybody has individual goals. There's absolutely, you can't treat one player like the other. Yes, they might be within 10 or 15 kilos of each other, but we've got every athlete at different stages. We've got first, second year pros. We've got some pros that have been, playing for 12 to 15 years professional. So we've got to kind of attack that of where they are in terms of their performance goals. So what are the coaches asking the player to do? How can we support that? So that could be always where we start is performance. We might look at their body composition goals. So do they need to be increasing muscle mass so they can hit those performance goals? Do they need to be potentially reducing body fat so they can, one of their goals might be they need to last longer, the full 90 minutes. There's definitely lots of different factors in that. But then there's also the health goals that I think a lot of us don't really think about when it comes to performance nutrition. So how are we looking at their optimizing their bloods, looking at how often they're getting ill and things like that. So that player health piece is probably a factor in itself. Travel considerations, massive, especially when at this time of year in pre-season, we're going to be doing a lot of traveling. We have a fairly congested schedule. A lot of teams are in the same boat, flying here, there, different cups and different kind of commercial obligations, so to say, and that will kind of crop up at various different times throughout the season as well. Cup games, international games, things like that, as well as we've seen the Club World Cup, we were just discussing it beforehand. Travel considerations are huge. And then probably finally, brings me on to probably the biggest point, and that's education. I think every day is an education day, and certainly for me, like I want to develop an autonomous athlete. I want everybody. If somebody asks one of my athletes that I work with, like, what are your goals? They'll be able to tell you. Whether you've been playing for years and years, and a player might think that they know exactly what they need to go in their body. Like for me, every athlete should have a goal, whether it be to get stronger or maintain what they're doing as a goal in itself. So yeah, develop that autonomous athlete that they can fuel themselves, look after themselves with my guidance. That's always my aim.
We talk about professional footballers as athletes, don't we? We talk about any pro sports athletes as athletes. But nutritional needs change depending on what the demands are on the human body. So I wonder how different does nutrition look like when you're talking about professional footballers as opposed to general athletes' nutrition, when it might be more carb heavy, equally, depending on the demands on the football pitch, that varies accordingly, I'd imagine.
Yeah, 100%. And you could probably break it down into how nutritional needs change daily, and then you can work your way up. So if we think day to day, we've got to look at what the demands of the session that they're doing. So if they're training and it's say it's a Tuesday or a Wednesday and it's a high load day, then we need to be adapting that breakfast accordingly to make sure they're increasing carbohydrate. Are they pre-hydrated, ready for it? So yeah, there's that aspect. If it was potentially a recovery day, and they had a bit of time up until the next kind of heavy session or even game, then we might go a little bit lower carbohydrate. What does that look like? It could be as simple as on our live station, putting like a nice, really colourful salad bar with loads of different types of protein, so they can try and build that up. So it could be as simple meal by meal, but then we look at the week schedule, and any athlete can take this on board. So we might have one game in a week versus 2 games in a week, sometimes even 3. We've also got to think about, like, so in that kind of case, there's congested fixtures. We're going to probably have a really habitual high carbohydrate diet throughout the whole week. But the challenge is I think sometimes we think that every player is playing every minute of every game, and there's going to be some players that are on the bench, some players that are subs, some players are going to be injured throughout that whole time. So there is that team periodization, but there's definitely the individual that's in there, and that's when we've got to think
when you
about,
look at that bigger picture of the whole team, the whole season, how important is it then that you individualise the nutritional needs of each footballer at Brentford? Like you say, it's easy to say, well, a player's been on the bench, they're involved in a match, so everybody gets the same dietary requirements for this particular period, this particular week. But as you get a third of the way into the season, halfway through the season, different players have different ailments. They've spent more time maybe on the pitch than some teammates. How important is it then that you have bespoke nutritional diets for each player?
Yeah, like very, very important. If we're going to think we might have 25 to 30 players in a squad, but then there's only going to be potentially 16 players involved in that game. So it makes things really tough, because a lot of times you don't know who's starting, they don't know who's starting, so you've almost got to prepare as if you are starting. So that definitely makes things different a little bit afterwards. Obviously, sometimes you get this is at any club, you're going to get some grumpy athletes afterwards that haven't played. But I think for me, I always have the kind of say, like, we prepare, we carb load as if you're going to start. Anybody can go down in the warm up, and you're required to step in. It's happened loads of times in my career, and there's been times when the player hasn't prepared correctly because they think they're not playing, and there's been times when it's been the other way around. They've come in, stepped in, put a full 90-minute shift in. So yeah, really, really important. And that also is how people adapt afterwards. Now, obviously, if you've got a good team, they're going to be preparing the loads right so that everybody's at the same kind of level to go, but it might be on different days. So you might have certain players that do top up after the games. You might have some teams put in like friendly fixtures throughout the week that nobody has a clue that we play. So yeah, it's about shifting things round for them, and it can be tough, sometimes when you've got something on in the canteen and it's maybe a higher carbohydrate meal that's required for some people and then potentially not for others. And for me, like, every athlete's got to make a mistake to learn from it, and it's just about being there, being present, educating them, showing them a different option. Could I make them do it? No, but are they going to feel good afterwards? Potentially not. And then we kind of use that to try and educate a little bit.
In a typical week, then, Ted, what does it look like if, say, you have a week where there's just one game on a Saturday or Sunday, and you start on Monday, and it might be a normal run-of-the-mill training day. Tuesday might be high-intensity work. Wednesday might be more slightly relaxed. How does that affect the job you and your team have to do, and give us examples of how dietary requirements would change in those situations?
Yeah, firstly, like, one confusing one for me, like, not a confusing one, but there are so many different ways to structure the week. And probably I've been at different clubs that have structured the week in completely different ways. So some clubs I've been at have done like 2 days in, 1 day off, 2 days in game. Some we've had like a full 5-day lead in. It's absolutely crazy. But let's use the example of like a game on a Saturday, off Sunday, in Monday, Tuesday, off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday game. Okay, so for me, like, after a day off, I think that, well, first it's the education on that day off on the Sunday. So we want to be promoting recovery-based kind of foods for the players that have played significant minutes, expended a certain amount of energy. It's not just about what they eat, it's also getting them to do some active recovery as well. Go out for a walk, be with their family, get that psychological recovery as well. So I'd kind of guide that with, okay, guys, here's some really good places to go out for a brunch spot with your family. Do you guys want to head out there? I know you're going to be off, but it's just pointing them in the right direction. But that's where they make their own decisions. We'll kind of guide them, send them home with some recovery packs after the game that could contain, like a high protein bar, tart cherry to potentially help them sleep beforehand. It could have a couple of carbohydrate snacks in, maybe some vitamin C for those guys that might pick up upper respiratory tract infections, particularly after games. So we're going to guide them, send them some places where to go, but give them that freedom on a Sunday. So on a Monday, come in. So we'd have pretty much like a regular breakfast on, so really promoting that high protein side of things, moderate carb, make sure we've got a bunch of antioxidants in them as well. So we'd have a lot of freshly made smoothies out, lots of different kind of cold press products for them as well. There's lots of guys that will be on collagen at certain times as well in the morning, so we try and look at how we can try and combine that in there. Depending on the training schedule on a Monday, you could have some players doing more than others. So players might be topping up more after the game, those who didn't play. So they'll be more like a moderate to a high session. Some of them will be doing a low session, those who played. So there might be actually kind of two different stations on in the canteen, the way I would put it on. So we might have some, maybe like a little kind of rice bar, like Asian kind of theme, because then you could go kind of two ways with that. We could go more like a lower carbohydrate, lots of veg, really good quality protein, or we could potentially add rice and noodles to that for those guys that did a little bit more. Tuesday, potentially really high day. I kind of treat like any high training session day almost like match day practice a little bit, because they're the days that we want to be kind of training our gut, practicing what we're going to have on match day when we wake up in the morning. So they're actually the days that we might have put some crepes on, put some American pancakes on that we would do on match day, and try and push the guys more towards that. So it's more of like an education piece as well for fueling what they do. Could have some gels available during training. Again, like if they're going to be hitting some significant loads, then we want to try and use that as a gut practice, get them feeling good, because we know the boys get nervous around match days and don't want to be taking on kind of food and gels sometimes, probably for a separate conversation. And then that goes off to a Wednesday recovery day, very similar to the Sunday. Thursday, potentially moderate. Friday, onto the kind of match day -1. So we're looking at habitually increasing carbohydrate on Friday, using kind of trying to switch things up a little bit on a match day -1. I know we have the typical pasta bar that all the boys look forward to, but always put like a dessert on, low fat, high carbohydrate dessert. Try and put some higher carbohydrate, lower protein smoothies dotted around the training ground in the fridges. And just try and promote that kind of the way of eating where players don't realise they're eating and drinking so much carbohydrate, and try and make it really, really easy for them. And for me, it's a Friday is about feeling good, and you want to make the players feel good in the gym by loosening up. You want to make them feel good about what they're eating as well, and you want them to really enjoy it and actually be look forward to that Friday. For me, send them home with some things if we have to. So a lot of my players will box up some food, box up a pasta bar so they can have that in the evening, and then on we go to Saturday with, depending on what time we're going. Again, very similar to the Friday in terms of higher carbohydrate foods. Very, very individualized for me. The kind of the way you attack things pre-game. Some players like to go a little bit heavier in the morning and lighter in the pre-match meal. Some players do it the other way around, which I'm absolutely fine about. There's no right or wrong way with that.
This is really interesting because we don't just have professionals watching and listening to this podcast, have amateur athletes as well, and obviously local leagues will be kicking off in the next month or so up and down the country. Amateur clubs don't have, as a rule, nutritionists that can help each player. So it's left to your own conscience, your own knowledge of what's good for you. How does this translate to that level of sport? And what can people like me, for example, take on board that might help you prepare for the weekend and when you play your next game?
Yeah, I think what makes it even more difficult is a lot of people using social media as their nutritionist as well, and there's all sorts of stuff going on there, and it is really confusing of where you find the right information, and also, like I said, nutrition is so individual. Like what works for one person will not work for another. So it's almost like you've got to have like that trial and error approach. That a pro might come out and say, we saw it last year. I can't remember what pro came out saying like, I have pancakes before a game, and then it just blew off. I even saw it in like the professional game. People were like, I want to try pancakes before a game. Like, I didn't know that was a thing. So it doesn't just happen on the amateur side; it happens in the professionals as well.
Well, and to that note, we had James Moorhen, who works with the England Rugby Union team, on earlier this summer, and he said at half time, I want to get energy and fuel into the bodies of the players. They don't want to take a lot on board, so I'll lay out a table in the dressing room and I'll have Jaffa cakes and sushi. Well, my ears pricked up and thought, well, I can take a box of Jaffa cakes with me. That's easily relatable.
Nothing has to be expensive. Genuinely, like I'll give you another example of electrolytes. So, not massively expensive, but they do if you're having one or two a day when you're training, gymming, match day, things like that. It can actually rock up the spend. And actually, pretty much you could just do 3 or 4 pinches of salt in water or orange juice, and you're pretty much getting exactly the same thing. It's just finding kind of what kind of works for you. And like I know James really well, and I love what James does. I learn a lot from James Moorhen himself, and like I love what they do on social media and things like that. And I actually use that and show that to some of our players as well to try and like get them eating, because that's what I want. That's what we want to do as nutritionists. Certainly for me, like I want our guys to be fueling better and feel good about it and feel the benefits of it. So generally, for me, it's so individual. Like I would never say pre-match or half-time just like leave things out on the kind of countertop. And the reason for that is I've had so many sit downs with players, and we've devised individualized plans, and they're like, yeah, I've got it. I know what I'm doing. I know what to have. I know what feels good for me. But when you're actually in that situation, things change. If you were to come in and you're 2-0 down, and you're getting orders there, and someone's speaking to you there, all of a sudden you've forgotten to drink, you've forgotten to eat, and you sat there, and then all of a sudden it hits you when you go back out, and you're like, God, I didn't feel very well in there, and I've got to do another 45 minutes, and it was hard. So I'm the type of nutritionist where I kind of know exactly what each player does. I'm not going to force it, but I'm going to help just kind of guide it. So a couple of things that I've done that I do currently. So as players come in, I like to have like a little kind of carbohydrate shot. So I use something, you can use like Beta Fuel from SIS, or Morton do a really good product that's like 80 grams of carbohydrate in 500 mils of fluid. Really, really cost effective, like super cheap. And all I'm doing is making it a little bit more concentrated. So 100 mils will give you 20 grams of carbohydrate. Like put a little bit of ice in there, make it taste good. And as players walk in, grab, okay, drinking it. That's the first bit of fuel. Then information starts coming on board, okay. And I'm just saying, okay, sip a sports drink, sip some electrolytes, get that first bit of fuel down. You get feeling good. Rehydrate, probably just as important as fueling, as we know that a lot of guys can sweat out 2 to 3 liters of fluid in an hour. It's crazy. And then the last thing you would do, almost like 2 or 3 minutes before leaving the changing room, like an energy gel, or if you don't like energy gels, it could be a carbohydrate shot, which is another just like a Nutrition X kind of 40 gram shot. Or I've got guys that just like a bit of like half a banana or real food, and I'll always try and push the real food side of things. I think nothing beats actual food for fueling. So, but it's so individual for those guys, for every single person. I haven't got one person that does things one way. But for me, like I want a players to try and hit a number of that kind of 40 to 60 grams of carbohydrate during that halftime period. And yeah, I'm usually pretty good at selling it. And, I think people make mistakes about trying to have too much too soon. And it's okay if a player comes to me and they're just used to having water, and it's like, oh, that's what feels good for me. It's like, okay, let's take loads of steps back. Let's look at training. Okay, when you're training, let's try half a gel. Okay, let's try this, let's try that. Afterwards, I'm like, did you feel good? Stomach okay? Great. Okay, can we do that 2 or 3 more times before we take it to a game situation? or you might be a little bit nervous. And always be sure to reinforce the fact. Show them the numbers that they've done, show them how well they played, and even get other people to reinforce it as well, like a coach. I get one of the coaches to go over and be like, absolutely smashed it today. Like, oh, did you eat something at half time? Like, because you were flying. Then the player's like, okay, other people can see it, like I'm ready to go. So there's a huge behaviour side of things, but start small, even if it's just starting with 20 grams at half time of carbohydrate, and see if you can get a little bit higher. And I think the next step after that is looking at that in-game fueling. So using breaks in play to take on carbohydrate. There's obviously a little bit of a debate about, okay, is it actually digesting? Is it actually getting to our blood? But we know that even just by doing like a simple mouth rinse, that's going to help increase our cognitive function. It's going to help us thinking better. Now, when you're dehydrated, underfueled, burned a load of calories, absolutely knackered, anything that we can do to try and get that small 1-2% going will help us in the last 10 minutes of a game. And to me, that's why we're here. It's almost like, don't think about how you feel at half time, think about how you're going to feel at 85 minutes. And that's, I think, where we get the true value of having a nutritionist help people fuel.
Yeah, it's a far cry, isn't it, from the days when somebody might bring on a tray of oranges at half time and that was your lot type of thing. It's often a conversation discussion we have when we talk about training, strength and conditioning, the evolution of technology, the evolution of knowledge, the evolution of the methodology used. And nutrition is exactly the same, I imagine. You know, you go back to when Arsene Wenger arrived at Arsenal, and his practices were seen as revolutionary in the English game. Certainly, in your experience over your career, how far has our understanding and then the practice, putting it into practice, the nutritional values, how far has that evolved?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think our understanding has been relatively unchanged for the last 10 years. Some people might say exactly the same thing, but I think one thing that has changed in nutrition, and certainly I think what kind of makes a good nutritionist versus like an outstanding nutritionist, is being able to translate that science into practice and actually being able to get people to do what you want them to do. That's the hardest bit. Honestly, I meet nutritionists now and I speak to them all the time who know so much about ACSM guidelines. They could literally recite the ACSM guidelines. And I'm sat there thinking, have you ever got a player to have 10 to 12 grams of carbohydrate per kilo of their body mass in a day? So you're talking like a kilo of carbohydrate. Have you ever, like, that is really, really hard. And I'm not saying that it can't be done, but it's really, really difficult. And they're just presenting, oh, that's what they should have. It's like, okay, well, how could we make them get there? Is it just by saying that? Does a player even understand what grams per kilo means? Probably not. So I think it's about using behavior change methods. A couple of them I've already discussed with you right there. So, for example, like using a coach to reinforce something is helping me. Other ways is, using other players. I'm lucky enough to work with some fantastic senior players that drive the younger players forwards. Use them as an example. What are they doing? Get them to almost just say what I'm about to say to them, and it's going to come out in a whole lot of different ways. So I think that to me is the next level of where nutrition is going. I think that, to be honest, I think certainly from when I started out, there was no sport and exercise nutrition degree. Now we're seeing them at St Mary's, Surrey University down here. They actually have undergraduates in sport and exercise nutrition. So I only expect the research to get better and the level of knowledge to get higher. But I think we do need to focus on how we put that in practically. And that's, for me, one thing that I wish I taught myself and did more research on beforehand was actually working with people and understanding the individual. That's invaluable, and it comes with experience.
Yeah, it's a common theme, isn't it? Ultimately, people sell to people, and that's how you get buy-in, which across any field is essential to being successful. Time is against us, Ted, but before I let you go, I wonder for those listening, and this is professional nutritionists, nutritionists that are training for their qualifications, as well as people in charge at local amateur clubs as well. What would be, if you had to give it your number one piece of advice, the top takeaway, if you like, for players, coaching staff looking to improve the nutritional values of the people they work with?
Yeah, I think probably the first thing that springs to mind is that kind of under fueling versus over fueling. I think from one thing I've seen just countless times in the past, and it's probably, if I was to take 10 random, say, like semi-pro players, I would guarantee that at least 8 out of 10 of them are under fueling with carbohydrate. We've got to remember that carbohydrate is the main fuel for our performance on the pitch. So that is what we need to do.
Is it possible to overfuel, out of interest?
Definitely is possible to overfuel, for sure, and that's when we see skin folds, body fats going up. The interesting thing about carbohydrates, it's so easy for some people to overconsume. That is when, like, it's that macronutrient that people can have a lot of, whereas protein, it's really tough to have a lot of it. More than 2 grams per kilo of protein, you'd really be feeling that. Whereas carbohydrate is a quick digester. Our body craves it because it's our main fuel for our brain. It's main fuel for what we want to do out on the pitch. But I also think there's a lot of conflicting information out there around it. People saying that carbohydrates are bad. People are saying that, I've heard it all, that fat is the main fuel, and that's what we want to become more fat adapted by cutting carbohydrates out. And for me, it's physiologically impossible for a high level, intermittent team sport athlete to be low carbohydrate and get the outputs that they could do. He's not saying they can't get through it, but yeah, it'd be monitoring your carbohydrate intake, and ideally, like, the next level from that is periodizing it. So having high carbohydrate days the day before and the day of, high carbohydrate days on those training days when you're trying to get the most out of your performance, but then also having lower carbohydrate days when you're not performing, and then you'll hopefully see the benefit both performance-wise, but then also body composition-wise as well.
Already I can feel a whole nother conversation coming along over that debate that you've touched upon there, Ted. Listen, I've found this conversation absolutely fascinating, as I'm sure our listeners have as well. For those that want to stay across your work and see how the season goes for you and Brentford, where can they find you on social media?
I don't do a huge amount on social media, but I'm on Instagram, tedmunson.nutrition, I think that's my handle on there, and yeah, that's kind of it, really.
That will do. Listen, really appreciate your time, and we wish you and Brentford all the very best in the season to come.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Unlocking sports science to push the limits of human potential. This is the Science for Sport podcast.
Many thanks to Ted Munson for joining us today and sharing his expertise and giving us an insight into what nutrition as a professional footballer looks like. If you found what he had to say interesting and want to learn more, you can do so by visiting our website, www.scienceforsport.com. And if you've enjoyed this edition of the Science for Sport podcast, then please do feel free to share it with a coach, a colleague, an athlete, or a friend. As I always say at this juncture, the more downloads we can get, the easier it becomes for us to then attract top-name athletes and professionals leading their field, such as Ted Munson, and getting them on their show to share their expertise with us. Well, that's just about all for this edition. Thanks once again for listening, and I look forward to the next time we all get together on the Science for Sport podcast.
Subscribe to the Science for Sport podcast now, wherever you listen to your podcasts. For more insights, resources, and to join the Academy, visit scienceforsport.com and connect with us on social media by searching for @ScienceForSport. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.